This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
President Trump issued a new wave of tariff threats on Wednesday. 22 countries now have until August 1st to make a deal or face levies of at least 20%. The steepest tariff threat is against Brazil at 50%, partly as retribution for what Trump calls the witch hunt against former President Jair Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro is currently facing trial in Brazil for his alleged participation in a coup attempt following his electoral defeat in 2022 to Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, the current president. In a letter announcing the tariffs, President Trump calls the trial an international disgrace and says, quote, "This trial should not be taking place. It's a witch hunt that should end immediately," unquote. President Lula da Silva responded by rejecting what he called interference or threats by the United States.
For more, we're joined now by Oscar-nominated Brazilian filmmaker Petra Costa, who's made 2 films about Brazilian politics. She was nominated for an Oscar for the film The Edge of Democracy. Her new documentary that is being released by Netflix next week, but she'll be at the Paris Theater in New York tonight, traces the rise of Christian nationalism and evangelism in Brazil and its power in politics. This is the trailer for Apocalypse in the Tropics. We've added English voices over where needed for our radio listeners.
This city was designed as a vision of Brazil's future. And the cement that held it together was a faith, not in God, but instead in the equally abstract ideas of progress and democracy.
God, homeland, family, and freedom.
I want to be a pastor of a generation that will change history.
In the last 40 years, evangelicals have grown from 5 to more than 30% of Brazil's population. A rapid religious shift molded into an unprecedented political force.
What really influences my vote is my religion.
We are the absolute majority in this country.
What made socialism fail was denying religion.
With truth, we're building a new politics in Brazil. Bolsonaro likes talking to me because I'm frank with him.
Brazil above everything, God above everyone.
That's democracy.
But democracy isn't just the will of the majority. It's also protection of the minorities.
Democracy is the absolute majority's will.
He's turning the church into a political pulpit.
Here, we'll destroy them.
Freedom of speech isn't freedom to attack. Democracy isn't anarchy.
What will happen to Brazilian democracy?
The Brazilian nation is living a new moment.
The trailer for Apocalypse in the Tropics. For more, we're joined by its director, Petra Costa. She is a Brazilian filmmaker and actress. So this film hits at a pivotal time as President Trump goes after Brazil every which way for hosting the BRICS summit with Lula in the lead to this trial that's taking place. And Bolsonaro is also at the center of this film, as well as the rise of evangelicals in Brazil. A lot of remarkable parallels to the United States. Bolsonaro known as the Trump of the tropics. Can you talk about who Bolsonaro is, this attempted coup, and where this whole religious backing comes from?
Yes, so Bolsonaro was a congressman when I made my film, The Edge of Democracy, which we spoke about here, Amy, a few years ago. He was one of the most far-right congressmen who was defending the military dictatorship, declared his vote against Dilma at the time, defending the torture of Dilma.
This is Dilma Rousseff, the president.
The first female president of Brazil. Then he decided to run for president and did not have the working class vote in the beginning. He gained that by declaring himself somewhat evangelical, making an alliance with the pastor who's the protagonist of our film, Malafaia, Silas Malafaia, a prominent televangelist. And in this marriage between religion and politics, Bolsonaro was very useful for a growing movement in Brazil that comes from the United States, which it's called Dominion theology, that has as a plan the takeover of the three branches of government: the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive. We had the chance of filming with Malafaia, this pastor, during the last 5 years. And during that time, what was fascinating to see was his power over the president only grew. And Bolsonaro became a vessel, an instrument to executing this Dominion theologist plan, which is very similar to what is happening in the United States with Trump and his allies, such as Mac Huckabee, Peter Hegseth, and
Huckabee, very significant. He is now the U.S. ambassador to Israel. And the last actions of Netanyahu in the United States yesterday, the Israeli prime minister, were to meet with the evangelical Christians of the United States supporting him in Israel.
And in this film, we also trace the origin of this evangelical, apocalyptic, and sometimes Zionist thought that believes that waging war in the Middle East will accelerate the second coming of Christ. A fascinating theology that is really shaping our geopolitics at this moment and is very understudied for its relevance. The film is an investigation into that, into how this apocalyptic theology is shaping Brazilian politics at this moment, and really making our elections become less a discussion of programs, of plans for the future, but holy wars.
And Petra, you do in the film, I mean, you take also like a historical look. It's not just about what's happened immediately. You document, for example, the visit of the American evangelist Billy Graham, who came to Brazil, I think, for the first time in 1960 and was met by massive audiences. So if you could talk about that, what was the appeal he had then? I mean, we're talking about 70 years ago, right? Over 60 years ago. And how that movement built from then.
Well, Brazil is one of the greatest Catholic nations in the world. And in the 60s and 70s, a movement called liberation theology was growing and had many thoughts about social justice, of empowering the poor and the oppressed in Brazil. But that movement was encountered with much antipathy by the likes of Kissinger and also the lobbying group, the Family, also known as the Fellowship in the United States, which thought as part of the Cold War project, it was interesting to send evangelical missionaries to Brazil against the alleged communist threat. Billy Graham went to Brazil. The dictatorship decided to show his cult, his rally or service in the Maracanã, the biggest stadium in Brazil, in all channels at the time. Evangelicalism grew. Since then, when I was born in the 80s, it was 5% of the population were evangelical. Today, there's 26% of the population. It's one of the fastest growing religious shifts in the history of mankind. And it's not problematic at all, and it's actually delivering social services and spiritual help and psychological help to many of Brazilians. And faith is something that we can't talk about, and there's no reason to interfere or to discuss people's faith, only when it decides to have a plan that will basically erode our democracy and one of the greatest achievements of modern society, which is the separation of church and state.
Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.